Anyone start over later in life and become successful? What's your story? I was 27 and working as an audio-visual tech for a crappy hotel. I found out my wife had been cheating on me, packed a small bag, lived on my friend's couch for a year and learned how to use a camera. I spent the next year submitting video reels to National Geographic and eventually got a job traveling around the world shooting video in places like Galapagos, Alaska and Costa Rica. After a few years I came back home from traveling and started a successful non-profit which helps other non-profits tell their stories, and I am a camera operator on several TV shows around town. I'm not rich or anything, but I definitely feel like I made it. Holy guacamole, National Geographic is one of my dream jobs. Not me, but my grandpa. When he turned 60 he decided he was unhappy and wanted to go back to school and become a pharmacist. Now 10+ years later, he is a very successful pharmacist teacher and he absolutely loves what he does. Every time he brings it up he says that he's going to work until he dies because he will never retire from what he loves. It's very inspiring to me, actually. Finally, someone older than me starting over. Spent about 8 years trying to make it as an actor. Did well enough with that and a bunch of side jobs to match my wife's income most years. We lived modestly but it was fine. But no way we could afford kids, and I wasn't going anywhere with it. Choice was move to LA and go all out, or go back to the drawing board. So I did sales for a couple of years while I got a plan together and went to law school at 32. 39 now, working for a judge after 3 years at a major firm in NYC got us most of the way out of debt. We have 3 kids and a house, and are starting to save up for the future. Still live modestly, but that's fine. The 5 of us like it simple. Quit my job as a semiconductor engineer. Less than a year later, touring with the Zac Brown Band as their trumpet player. Maybe I'm easily fooled, but semiconductor engineer doesn't really sound all that bad to start with. 26 years as a lawyer. Insanity, pressure, stress, worry and crappy attitude about life. Now 12 years as a small contractor building and fixing things, and I've never been happier. Plus I haven't had to wear uncomfortable shoes in I don't know how long. Successful? Number. Happy? Yes. I was raised in a very musical home and was mostly being groomed to be a professional classical violinist. After 1 semester at college in the music program, I realized that I just wasn't that great. I was aware there was a limit to my abilities and that I had reached it, and that college was about as high as I was getting in the music world. Anyway, tried a few different approaches to music over the next year or 2. I moved to the Twin Cities and joined a band, etc. Nothing worked and I really disliked the position I had put myself in. Out of the blue I decided to move out to bumfuck Wyoming and start to work on ranches, and eventually began to compete in rodeos. I have won a handful of amateur rodeos within the first year, and even have an amateur series under my belt now. I have never been so proud. Unfortunately, last week I had broken my neck on the best bronc ride I have had yet, minus the neck breaking part, and will be out of commission for the rest of this series. I hope to be healed up and ready to go come June when the next amateur series starts. TLDR, was a city kid, said frick it, now I'm rodeo cowboy. I dropped out of college about 8 years ago. I was one of those kids who didn't understand the opportunity I was given until I squandered it away. After that I fell into a cycle of depression and drug abuse, worked a terrible dead-end low-paying job, and alienated most friends and family. I just felt as though I set myself up for a life of disappointment. After about 6 years I got tired of feeling sorry for myself and decided to take responsibility for my own well-being. Since then I now have a great union job, a small house of my own, and am much more social with friends and family. Trust me when I say it is never too late to turn things around. I consider those dark days to be some of the most important and influential times in my life. After all, the sweet just ain't as sweet without the sour. Hello me, H addict for 10 years, P everything away, now sober and have a kick butt life. Went from completely broke and homeless at 24, to dead-end job and crashing on a friend's couch, to nursing school, then to grad school. I'm now a nurse practitioner making $100,000 a year. It was a long and difficult road. I am in my mid-30s now, still paying on student loans since I started with zero money, but worth it. At 53, after raising both my kids, I decided to go and get the degree I always wanted. So, I started at my community college and got my associates in liberal arts. I transferred to an accredited school and now I'm in my senior year towards my BS in English education. Go me. I'm 28 and I'm interested in getting an education degree. Really looking at being an ESL teacher. Not sure if you would consider it successful, but it's been a nice change. After 3 years of computer tech support, I was severely depressed and stressed over my own job security. Later that year I quit my job and looked for a lower paying job in a field I was much more interested in. A couple of years later, I had some experience under my belt and got a higher position doing a thing I enjoyed. It doesn't pay as much, but I am happier. After many years of homelessness and drug addiction, I went back to vocational school for 1 year at 28 and now I make over 100k a year doing information security. I'm 37 now. For those that think all they need is 1 year at a vocational school to be able to work information security or make $100k, there is disappointment in your future. This one's not me but my grandma. Both of her parents were serious, bad news alcoholics. Moved around the country a lot when she was a kid, lived through some really traumatic situations, dropped out of high school when she got pregnant with my mom, married my grandpa, also a teenager at the time, and took a job as a seamstress. Flash forward 18 years, my mom is headed off to college and my grandparents are getting a divorce. Grandma realizes that she's a divorced empty nester without a high school diploma, so she buckles down, gets a GED, and shortly after follows my mom to college. I mean literally follows. She moved to the same town to enroll in the state college. My mom didn't do well in school and only got her diploma after my brother and I were born, but grandma was not joking around. Graduated with straight A's and a business degree. A few years earlier she had done some clerical work in an insurance office. She got back in touch with them and started working her way up. When she retired about 10 years ago, she was the director of the Midwestern region for a major national insurance company. She once said something to me like, yes, I had to work very hard to get out of the situation I was in earlier in life, but I was working hard for years and years before it happened. I was very lucky that opportunities finally came along. Sound like grandma made her own luck. Good for her. I hated college when I was younger. I ended up changing majors a lot and finally settled on a 1-year automotive tech degree. I was really into cars then. I got a job in Raleigh, NC, lived in Raleigh Apex my whole life, and started turning wrenches. I was a mechanic for about 8 years and over that time, I started to realize I didn't want to do this forever. The pay wasn't stable and the work became monotonous to me, among other things. In 2008 when the economy tanked, the work really dried up. After getting a 38-hour paycheck, mechanics are on flat rate time, 1 paycheck, bi-weekly. I decided that now was the time to go back to college. I was 26 at the time and had some money saved. I decided to do something that was interesting, challenging and of course, paid well. I chose electrical engineering. Go big or go home. Right? I applied to UNC Charlotte and was accepted for the upcoming semester. I uprooted myself and moved from Raleigh to Charlotte, leaving everything behind. All my friends, my family, everything I had known for 27 years. I had just one friend person I knew in Charlotte. Granted, Charlotte is only 3 hours away from Raleigh, but that doesn't change the fact. The next 4 years were filled with endless nights on campus, especially senior year. Good grief. Studying at home, and a general lack of a social life outside school. I survived off student loans and grants, Pell, UNC, lottery. Then I got an engineering internship my junior year which helped a lot. In May of 2013 I graduated with a BS in EE and a minor in math. I already had that engineering internship which lasted until July. I started my current engineering job that August, and here we are today. If you had asked the young me if I would have ever done anything with math when I was younger, I would have died laughing. Going from a mechanic to an electrical engineer was never in my plans, but I'm so glad I made the choice to do it. It's never too late. I'm 51 and work in accounting. 31 years in the same profession. I want to become a florist. Anyone got any advice they can throw my way? I saw a post on here a little while back regarding inspiring advice or something like that. Basically the person was saying something like, I don't want to go back to school. I'll be 40 by the time I graduate, and the advice giver said, well, you're going to be 40 anyway. Probably got the wording wrong, but I thought that was pretty cool. By successful do you mean rich? A lot of people mistake being rich for being successful. If you just want to be rich, then that's cool. If that's your only goal, then fine. I find it kind of empty and shallow, but then we're all different. If what you're asking is, did you realize there was something that you wanted and then successfully set out to achieve it, then that's a whole different ballgame. A friend of mine had a career going in academia. She realized after a few years that she really wasn't loving it, and she quit to go and have the 2 kids that she was longing for and got a part-time job in a shop. Her family isn't as well off, but they're really happy. I consider that to be very successful. Another friend spent years working in bars but spent a lot of time working on his hobby in the background. A couple of years ago his wood sculpting business really took off and he can live off the money he makes from that now. He's not rolling in it, but he makes ends meet and he loves what he does with his days. I consider him very successful. So I think that anyone who ditches the life that they were living just because they thought it was the right thing to do, and goes off to do something they truly want to do, even if it leaves them poor or struggling, is successful. Money's just money. It's impossible to live without it, but above a certain threshold it doesn't actually make you any happier, and that threshold is lower than you might imagine. The absence of worry is much more precious than an excess of cash. But an excess of cash doesn't make up for a feeling of emptiness and unfulfillment. Well said. I work a job where I could easily double my income with hard work, but I hate my job, so I avoid it at all cost. Need to figure out what would bring me some sense of fulfillment. Thanks for your stories. Started out as a struggling lawyer. Eventually, I worked my way up to a successful practice. Got mixed up with some bad folks, and things went south fast. Met a guy who could turn it all around and give me a blank slate. Now I work at a Cinnabon in Omaha. I've started over 2 times with no job, no home, 0 possessions, and only pocket change. You would be very surprised how quickly you start accumulating stuff once you get going. I now live a nice middle class life with a great wife and good kids. I've found the times when I had nothing to be the most free. You'll never have more free time. Near fatal mountain bike accident at 35. Invalid till 38. Started a man with a van thing still living in parents' basement. Grew it into a real company. Grossed well over 3M last year. Expecting to almost double that by next year. 53 now. Proud of you, buddy. Left my job at 50 and blew my retirement on living expenses. Eventually found a gov job that paid half my previous salary by his good potential. Salary gradually increasing to more than previous job and retirement is the crap. Dodge that bullet. Yup, sure. I moved out when I was 16 and was a street rat for a couple of years. I bounced from schools and living arrangements and occasionally couch for a couple of years until I turned 18. At 18 I joined the military and it was like being born again. I was eating every day. I had somewhere to live. My clothes weren't rotting off of me. I had pride in what I do and what I accomplished. I was successful enough at it that I was offered a commission from the ranks. Basically becoming an officer and attending university on the government dime. Not something Canada does often. Needless to say, I jumped at the opportunity and started my commission. I then encountered 2 minor problems. 1. I wasn't good at my degree. 2. I wasn't good at being an officer, apparently. Well, one thing led to another and I rapidly moved from being a rising star moving through the ranks to hitting a brick wall. I could have changed degrees and even career paths in the military, but my heart was set on being a ship's captain and the only way was through Mars career path. Fact was the military wasn't interested in having a second-rate officer and I wasn't ready to be second-rate anything. So I left. Or was shown the door depending on your point of view. I spiraled into depression and lived primarily in a bathrobe watching Oprah. For 3 months. That was enough. I picked myself up after that and started again with no civilian experience. I attended school, became a MCP and started my own business, Dial a Geek. That was 13 years ago. Since then I've expanded my holdings to include computer stores and a software development studio. I have multiple locations in BC and service IT clients all across Canada. I have been a star in a reality show where I and other business experts have worked to save small businesses. To say my life is comfortable would be an understatement, and I'm constantly grateful for the opportunities it has given me. Even though it was a rough patch, the fact that the military was not a good fit for me was the best thing for me. I learned key skills and discipline. They gave me a job when I so desperately needed, and when it wasn't a good fit anymore they asked me to leave. That hurt at the time, but the reality is I am far more suited for what I do now than I ever was in the military. So for me it was a classic case of making lemonade. My parents did this. They moved away young, had 4 kids, moved to where we live today. Both went back to school, got a degree. My mum is now considered a specialist in her field and had a department started in the education board to further the work she has done. My dad set up several autistic organizations while also helping revive the Irish language. He got the Irish organization a couple mil investments. He was on the board for the current organization, but he stepped down so he could take over running it. He recently got them about 5 mil in lottery funds, a new location and a taxi company for the organization. This was to help provide jobs to people with autism and learning difficulties. They have more under their belts, but this is some of the bigger stuff they have achieved in the last 20 years. They both were in their 30s when they started. I got laid off after working for the same company for 12 years. I'm just finishing up prereqs to get into nursing school. Long-term goal is nurse anesthetist. I'm never working in a cubicle again. I don't know. I feel like my life track was not ordinary. I was a smart kid. I moved around a lot as a kid, and moved around even more when I was a teenager. Because of this I was kicked out of high school at 11th grade because I didn't want to be there. Long story short, I was kicked out of my house at 17 because my parents and I had trouble getting along. I tried to live on my own and go to community college, but that completely failed. Had to work my butt off just to pay the bills. I eventually got a good job doing tech support at an ISP, learned Unix and some programming. I started doing open source development, then I ended up getting a job with Apple. It allowed me to move to California, where I worked for them for 6 years, then went back to school. I went to a community college, then was accepted into UCSD for computer science. At this point I was in my 30s. I finished when I was 32. And now I am 34 with an amazing career and I am about to get married. I think I am pretty dang lucky, to be honest. I started in a big company straight out of a top university. Then I went on to start my own company. The company was success and is still operating. But I wasn't happy. I did a reset and went on an internship in Peru at 30. Now I'm in management at that international NGO, having worked in several different countries managing multi-million-dollar projects. I have always dreamed of getting into that line of work, but I honestly have no idea where to start. I'm a later in life guy who is looking for a reset as well, and I would love to hear any advice you might have to give. This isn't me, since I am too young for this to apply, but I am always impressed that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were in their 40s and had already worked in the comics industry for 20 years before they created their most iconic characters. Without crapping on them at all, it's kinda funny that it took them all that time to come up with a man who's an ant and a man who's a spider. After 25 years in food service, mostly as GM of steakhouses, I took a huge pay cut and started over in the golf industry. I have now been head pro at my course for 10 years. I would never go back. Do something you love, and you will never even feel like you are working. Dang. I love golf. That's pretty awesome. My mom runs her own accounting business, so I hear stories about her clients a lot. One of her clients didn't do anything after high school until he decided to go college at the age of 30. He's 42 now and made partner at some large accounting firm. I'm going to brag on my nana a bit. My pop divorced her after nearly 25 years of marriage and they'd been together since she was 14. She had only finished high school and had never worked anywhere because she dedicated her life to taking care of my 2 uncles, my dad, and pop. So she's in her mid-40s, no work experience or references, no formal education, but she didn't let that get her down. She found a little place, started working at this little bookstore. Years later, she owns the farm of her dreams. She has a fiber business selling yarn and knitted items, and she teaches classes in knitting and dyeing. She has a lovely, perfect for her husband. I'm so proud of her. 3. Not really later in life, but struggled to find a job after finishing college. Took one as a manager of a self-storage company in a drug-ridden, high-crime community that paid $10 an hour. Hated the job. One day my office gets broken into by some idiot looking for drug money, as if we keep cash lying around and don't process electronically. The detective that came to process the scene for prints etc looked at me and said, I'm too smart to be working there. Go to grad school and get an internship. He pointed a school out to me. I applied after the deadline and somehow still got in. Went there, did the work, got an internship with a cybersecurity startup. Boss referred me to another company, got a job there, moved away to a new state, met my wife, and consider myself very successful for my age. It helps that my wife is a medical professional that makes a ton of cash too. Much of my college roommates, very close-knit extended family, dropped out of college or started late in some way. His grandma was born in Sweden and moved to New York in her 20s. His grandpa was raised by mentally unstable adults and on multiple occasions as a child got home to an empty house because his parent had been arrested at a mental hospital. They found each other in Seattle and, after getting their degrees, eventually moved to California. They weren't impoverished throughout this, but she mentioned a few times they were almost homeless or broke. They opened up the house they built in California to anybody and everybody who needed their help. Frequently Pappy would help his students by offering his house, advice, and friendship to them. His daughter would continue to build on the property, making small one-room shacks and guest rooms. She also became a teacher, getting her degree a few years after she first dropped out of high school. She still takes in troubled students, and currently around 5-6 unrelated people live there. Kids who either can't stand to go back to their home lives or can't afford anything else. This is exactly what my family does. Mom worked in IT management for 20 plus years and then HP offered her a retirement package. She took it, became a banker which lasted another 19 years. Now she is retired, no job, but volunteers and has an active social life. Dad worked in IT tech for 25 plus years. His work sent him to CPR training and he liked it so much he pursued a degree and work in nursing for 16 plus years. Now he's retired, substitute nurses for the school district, volunteers with the sheriff and schools, and the local retirement community. Me, I've been in IT for 20 plus years and I'm looking to move to a position with better work-life balance. Not necessarily in the same field, but who knows. It's doable, but it isn't trivial. After a bout with paranoia, I resigned my government job to hide in a corner and cry for 3 weeks. After lots of bad advice from doctors and friends, I let too much time pass before contacting a lawyer to return to my previous employer. After being nearly homeless and giving up on my first wife who had severe problems with drugs she would never even admit to, I have moved on and restarted my career. Every day is an opportunity to heal and grow. If it makes you feel any better, I have no idea who you are. I'm considering walking away from my career now. I'm still only 26, but to me it feels like starting over late in life. This was a good thread. Thanks. I'm doing this right now. Dropped out of college and started a business when I was 21. Lost it all in 2008 and then got a great job with a great company. Spoke out against a policy I disagreed with and didn't realize I was committing career suicide at the time until I started failing performance reviews. Got depressed because my great job with opportunity to grow turned into a dead-end job. Started drinking heavily for about 2 years until I found my life's calling at 30 years old. I flew a plane for the first time. I did some research. Found out being a professional pilot was an obtainable goal. Cashed out my retirement. Sold everything I didn't need. Moved halfway across the country to finish school and complete my flight training. Now, at 32, I'm close to graduating college and getting closer to getting my commercial pilot's license every day. I thought my life had ended at 29. The plan was to drink till my liver gave out. I found a reason to live, and I certainly hope to find success for starting over later on life. 32. Been poor my whole life. Just got into the millwrights union. Looks like chances are good I will be quite well off in a couple months. So, I went to college enamored with the study of classics. Loved it so much that I decided to follow the dream of going into academia and go to grad school. Sure, I knew that the job market would be tough afterward, but hey, with youthful optimism, I figured I could make it. Flash forward 5 years and I'm absolutely miserable. I still enjoyed the material, but I had learned that I'm not a huge fan of research and the department culture was, to be frank, crap. Add in a long-term relationship with a guy whom I was pretty incompatible with and, yeah, I wasn't too happy at all. So I got out of grad school and into a software development training program. Nowadays I do that. It's enjoyable work with a bunch of great people, including a few other refugees of liberal arts grad programs. Married to a guy who fits my temperament perfectly and yeah, I'm pretty happy now. It's not a complete reset of life like some stories in here, but it's totally what I did not expect I'd be doing 10 years or even 5 years ago. I started my life late in the first place after spending 8 years in the army. I finished college at 30 years old and worked as a geologist for a while. I recently went from that to high school math teacher when ONG went bust. I am so much happier now despite making significantly less money. I started over more than once in my life. Finished school when I was 16 and didn't know what I wanted to do next, so I did nothing. After a year of nothing I decided to go to school again to get my entrance qualification for studying at a University of Applied Sciences. A few months of procrastination, drugs, and parties later and I felt that this wasn't the right thing for me. This circle went on a second time and a third, until it just became an alibi for not doing anything important at all while still living on the expenses of my parents. God bless them. But at some point when I was 22 or 23 I realized that I can't go on like this or I would become homeless, friendless, miserable and die in agony. So I pulled my crap together and went through a training program for a handcrafting job. The kind of program where all the retards like me get their last chance. And I really succeeded and got a job in a big company where I finished the apprenticeship a skilled worker. After 5 years working for that company I got fired because FU. I got another job where I was completely ripped off to the point where I couldn't pay my bills anymore and had to file a lawsuit against my employer who shortly after declared bankruptcy. Turn the page. Here I am, earning decent money again. But I still don't know after all these years why I struggle so hard for the so-called success when all I can think of at Friday night is to tell some strangers on the internet what they already know themselves. TLDR, I need to get laid. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.